Hello and welcome to Energy Transition Talk, the podcast that explores the challenges and opportunities of transitioning to a low carbon future. I'm Paulina.
I'm Justine.
And I'm Jim.
And we're your hosts for the Energy Transition Talk.
In this podcast, we seek to break down some of the most complex and important issues regarding the energy transition and how it impacts us. In each episode, we seek to tell a story by bringing you various perspectives about the energy transition so that you can make the best and most informed decisions for you and your communities.
One tough question that must be answered in the energy transition is, what are the real costs of going green and who is going to pay the bill? In our latest episode, we spoke to Brad Handler at the Colorado School of Mines on the topic of private financing, why we're still investing in fossil fuels, the challenges of redirecting money to developing countries, and the role that Wall Street and industry might play in the energy transition. So if you haven't listened to it yet, please be sure to check it out.
In today's episode, we speak with a panel of mineral economics students from Ghana who are taking their classes at Colorado School of Mines. It's Eben, John, Rueben, and Felix, who are going to help us become better acquainted with the perspective from sub-Saharan Africa, where sustainable development must go hand in hand with decarbonization goals. Here's our conversation. In our episode of the cost of going green, we had a rather broad conversation with Brad Handler from the Sustainable Finance Lab of the Payne Institute for Public Policy at the Colorado School of Mines. He gave us the broad kind of global view, and now we've got this incredible opportunity to talk to a panel of 4 mineral economics students. I'd say they're students, but you'll find out from their introductions that they've got quite a bit of background as well as working in the regulatory field in this subject. But all 4 of them are mineral economics students at the School of Mines, but they all come from Ghana. And that perspective, we think, is really going to be a unique contribution to our message here today. So we're going to first start out with general introductions. And so, Eben, I want you to kind of kick this thing off, but we'd like to hear from all 4 of our panelists here on just a brief introduction of yourself, what sparked your interest in mineral economics and in the energy kind of field in general.
Okay.
Eben, take it away.
To start with, Eben Sam is my name, and I currently serve as a graduate student, research assistant at the Payne Institute for Public Policy in Golden, Colorado here. And so my academic journey in economics began in Ghana, where I earned my bachelor's degree, subsequently working with the National Petroleum Authority in Ghana for about 2 years. This experience was very pivotal and led me to further my education in the UK, where I earned a master's degree in economics, banking, and finance. So my pursuit of knowledge and passion for addressing the global energy challenges brought me to the United States, specifically to Colorado School of Mines, where I am currently working towards a master's degree in mineral and energy economics, which I'm looking at graduating in May next year. So one of my most enriching experience was collaborating with Prof. Jim yourself and the Colorado methane rule verification. This project, alongside with my participation in the 2 reports with the Payne Institute on critical mineral outlook, has deepened my fascination with mineral impact and economies that captivate me. So this experience, coupled with the state of our facilities here and the resources available in the USA, make it an ideal destination for my academic and professional development.
Great.
Well, thank you, Eben. Who's up next?
Ruben, you want to go? Oh, I don't mind. My name is Rueben Urigani Anafo, and I'm from Ghana. Currently, I'm a master's student here in Golden at the Colorado School of Mines. I'm studying minerals and energy economics, and thankfully, I'm happy to start some research work with Brad. I have about 11 years experience with in the petroleum industry. That's the downstream petroleum industry in Ghana. And before joining Mines, I was working with the National Petroleum Authority all this while. And I mean, my quest for more knowledge and my quest for knowledge in the field of energy led me to, come here to the United States of America learn more. And I was happy, and I'm happy to be here. And since I got here, I've had opportunity to talk to a lot of people, and most of the talks are on energy transition, and climate change. So I was very happy when this was brought to me that there's going to be a talk on energy transition, and here am I. I am happy to be with you guys and hope to contribute my little.
Hey, John, can you give a bit of an introduction?
Yeah, Jim, happy to be here. My name is John Ayaburi, and I'm a PhD candidate in operations research. And like you said, I started off as a mineral and energy economics master's student before transitioning to operations research. And predominantly, my work is twofold. One is in energy transition and looking at reliable energy supply, and at the same time, looking at how we can make use of the resources that are kind of like in Africa to spearhead and kind of like fast track the energy transition. And the other part of my research, which is what I'm working on currently in underground mining, is more related to mine safety and looking at how these underground mine companies can kind of like extract ore profitably and safely in order to provide the critical materials that are required for the energy transition. So that is what I'm doing. But also I have other works on transitioning from diesel to battery electric vehicles, which I think is very fascinating. I may not be contributing directly to the energy space, but I think I'm definitely contributing to minimizing emissions. So that's all about me.
That's good. Well, Felix, you're the last of the crew. Tell us about you.
Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Felix Ayaburi. I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in the Mineral Energy program at the Colorado School of Mines, and also working as a graduate researcher with Payne Institute for Public Policy, where I work with Brad Handler in the Sustainable Finance Lab. I have a background in petroleum engineering, and I bring with me approximately 2 years of hands-on experience from my time at Modec Production Services, a respected player in the offshore oil and gas production. Energy serves as the lifeblood of our modern world. It fuels our vehicles, it powers our machineries, and it illuminates our homes. This fascinates me, and my journey in the energy sector began in the context of the burgeoning oil and gas industry in Ghana. It was an exciting time for the nation as it commenced oil production in 2009, with Talu as the sole operator and Modec as the significant contributor, offshore driller. The presence of 3 active oil fields in Ghana, Jubilee 10 and Sankofa, further deepened my interest in the energy sector, and this particularly led me to pursue a degree in petroleum engineering. But now, in the mineral and energy sector, I'm particularly interested in the impact of mineral economics in global markets because it fascinates to see how the supply and demand for minerals can influence the world economy and how the prices and availability of minerals affect various industries, from technology, construction, which in turn can have ripple effects on international trade and economic stability. So I decided to pursue studies in the United States, as it offers a wealth of opportunities to gain deeper understanding of this field and make meaningful impacts when I return to Ghana. Thank you.
Well, let's stick with you, Felix, because that's a great technical background to go from petroleum engineering and add the economics kind of perspective. Can you just go a little bit deeper? What does the term energy transition mean to you? And also a little bit of how your maybe perspective of this has changed from when you were in Ghana to we're now in the United States. Do you see similarities or differences between the general public's view of what that phrase means?
Thank you, Jim. To me, energy transition refers to the shift from traditional, often fossil fuel-based energy sources, such as coal, oil, and natural gas, to more sustainable and environmentally friendly sources of energy. So this transition aims to reduce greenhouse emissions, combat climate change, and move towards cleaner, more sustainable energy systems. It typically involves greater focus on renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, hydroelectric power, and a decrease in reliance on non-renewable and polluting energy sources. With regards to Ghana, the difference between energy transition and how my perspective has changed. A country like Ghana, oil and gas is a major player in our economy. Not to say it's not a major player in the United States economy, but over here, the economy is kind of diverse, unlike Ghana. So my perception of energy transition in Ghana was not so much of a big deal because it wasn't something we're solely focused on, because this is the spine of our economy. But over here in the United States, having worked with Brad Handler recently on a paper, which is the cleaning of the United States oil and gas sector. So this paper was basically looking at ways to beat down methane emissions at oil and gas production sites. This has elucidated and illuminated me a lot on the perception of energy transition. And I think with respect to Ghana and United States, these two concepts are a bit different. Thank you.
No, it seems to me, and again, I'm not an expert in this, is that maybe in a country like Ghana, maybe the emphasis on energy transition is still around energy security, of having enough energy to allow the local economy to grow and to get more people out of poverty. Maybe in the United States, with your work with Brad Handler, it's been more on the emissions of some of the fossil fuel kind of industries. Is that a fair comment about the emphasis on energy security and sustainable growth versus on the environmental impact?
Yes, that's fair enough.
Okay, so that really you got to have enough energy, as you said, for the lifeblood of the economy to keep it going, and might be a higher priority in areas that are still a developing economy.
Correct.
So I'm going to move this over to John to ask a similar but maybe more global finance sort of question. There's been a lot of conversation for a number of years about how will the developing economies get the funding they need to make the changes that they need to make, as well as to have the energy supply needed for sustainable growth. So there's conversations at the UN and all of these COP meetings, et cetera, about a north-south divide, about a rich north that essentially polluted and got rich from it. And now how does it support or work with a developing South that is still trying to grow to get the economy where it wants to be? So can you talk a little bit about that perspective of North-South in terms of the finance and where the money comes from?
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I mean, like you do provide a very good introduction to that, and the North-South divide has been a predominant issue where we have the global North trying to superimpose policies on the global South, and you and I can point to the fact that a lot of the global North countries have already developed, they're industrialized, and more than half of the industrialization came from their dependence on fossil fuel-based production. And it has gotten to the point where we have the United Nations Convention and the framework, and then the Convention of Parties trying to look at global response to the threat of climate change, and also trying to look at minimizing greenhouse gas emission. But what often happens is that the developed world is actually willing to give money to the developing countries. But there's this issue of justice and inequity, in the sense that when they give the money, we just hear the money in the media. Okay, this country is donating this amount of money to this country to kind of like decarbonize. But we don't get to see how much detail is in those documents. For example, there are instances where the United States, the UK, and other countries were able to promise South Africa some tons of money, like lots of money, to transition from coal to renewable and then sustainably environmentally friendly production technologies. But the take there was that sometimes we don't take into perspective these countries are still lacking behind and they need to develop. Almost 85% of South Africa's electricity production comes from coal. Now, if you do give me that amount of money and you want me to transition as a country, how am I supposed to face in the transition? Right. So half of this is the global North has the money, has the policies, but there's no connection and there's no partnership between the lender and the receiver. And because of that, it leads to points where in the developer, especially in South Africa, and also like they did in Indonesia, where stakeholders are calling the amount that they are giving us empty talk, right? You are giving me this money, but what am I supposed to do with it? You just want me to transition. And half of these transitions also have conditionalities. And those conditionalities are oftentimes conditionalities that worked in the northern countries that are being superimposed. So if you go to, for example, South Africa or maybe Ghana, we need energy security, like you said, right? Now, we don't even have, the average person probably even makes less than $5 a week. And if that average person has to pay for electricity, and the person actually at this particular point doesn't have reliable electricity, now we are talking about shifting to renewable sources. So I think, yes, the finance is there. Just to summarize, the finance is there. And I'm happy that the global North is actually trying to support the global South. I think there has to be more integration and more policy framework between both parties to understand what the giver wants and what the receiver also wants, so they can come to a happy medium. And like you say, the term transition here is very favorable. But if you go to Africa and talk about transition, people get scared. Now, everybody's talking about how just is that? How equitable, right? Then the next step is going to be, how sure you're not going to deprive me of what I already have, even though that is insufficient. So there is this pushback. And I think, like you said, or like I said earlier, there has to be a happy medium between the global North and the South in terms of like coming up with partnerships and, yes, give the money, but come together and design policies that are favorable to both parties.
I like your phrase, empty talk. And it isn't just all about sending somebody a check someplace, right? It really is about the capability of the transition from the existing maybe coal-based economies, dealing with the just how much the common individual has to spend on energy with regard to that, and making sure basic needs are met, and making sure it isn't just money that may go into a corrupt system or governance problem or whatever, and into the hands of those who are already rich, instead of those that really need the help. So it's a collaboration then, right? More than it is just a check.
Yes, it has to be a collaboration and more than just the check. And like you said, the check is one part of it. But a recent report by the African Development Bank actually shows that, I mean, across Africa, people are looking for help and then policies and collaboration in the front of technical and technological advancement. They are looking at policies of mitigation and adaptation, and they are also looking at policies with regards to climate financing. So like you said, we have the climate financing piece. We also need capacity building. So we need capacity building, we need adaptation, we need mitigation, and we need technological advancement. Now, if you give them money and all these 5 broad areas are not coordinated, then there's going to be a pushback about what the people want versus what the global North actually wants. We know globally, we all want to achieve the greenhouse gas emission limits, but it has to take like a uniform approach and more like a universal tool, where we are taking each other's needs into consideration.
It's kind of like, I mean, there have been projects where the global North, however well intentioned the effort was, is they just come into a local community, they give them the northern technology, and they said, here, you're all set up, and we'll leave now, and without kind of working on making that part of the local economy, about developing the skills. Can anybody repair when something breaks?
It's
Can
broken,
somebody
yeah.
have the equipment, parts to keep it going, and make it part of the integral society, local society, instead of just, here's our answer, here you go do it, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are always like solution methodologies that work, and sometimes, like you said, there's geographical limitations as to how applicable a solution can be.
Sometimes charity's the wrong answer, right? It's the working together to uplift all hands, right? Type of thing.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Well, I'm going to get to Rueben on a topic, because obviously African nations are trying to raise their own voice of what energy transition, what just transition means to the global South, and what it should mean, more than just the empty talk, more than just the checkbook. And to try to put their voice into the conversation, the global UN conversation about what they think should be done, not just what the North thinks should be done for them. So, Rueben, I've read recent articles about something called the Nairobi Convention, where African environmental ministers and finance ministers got together, and even policies that are being worked on and promoted by African countries such as Ghana. Can you tell us a little bit about the African voice in this conversation?
Right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Sometime in September this year, that was last month, we had a group of African leaders coming together in Nairobi to have a prolonged discussion on the much talked about energy transition, which encompasses the climate change and other stuff. And then, at this declaration, there was a strong push for an accelerated action and financing mechanisms of this whole conversation. And the African leaders present there, or the leaders present there, were called for, urgent actions by developed countries such as America, and other developed countries to reduce carbon emission. There were proposals on new financing mechanisms and to restructure all this conversation. We all know Africa is crippling with debt and stocks to unlock climate funding. And when conversations of this nature come up, we are always at the mercy because we have little of financing, and we always look up to the developed countries like America and other developed countries to come to our aid to help in this conversation and decarbonizing the whole global economy for equity and shared prosperity. If you really followed conversations that went on last month, you realize that there was a huge call for investment to promote sustainable use of Africa's natural resources, as John mentioned, and also for the continent's transition to low carbon development, and then also contribution to global decarbonization. So I think the meeting that was held, or the summit that was held in Nairobi, is in order, and it's a good call. Hoping that there's going to be a huge help, or there's going to be good help from developing countries such as the United States of America. And Africa, as we all know, is always at the mercy when talks of climate change, talks of decarbonization, that's moving from fossil fuel to cleaner fuel. And I'm just praying and hoping that someday we'll also get to be a par with the developed countries in trying to transition from fossil fuel to the cleaner fuel, like wind, solar, and other stuff. I don't know, but climate change effects concerns such as prolonged drought, devastating floods, wild and forest fires, which cause massive impact on African economy, is really a talk of the time. So we are hoping that there's going to be much focus on that to help Africa also get to the level at which we have to get to when we talk of climate change, and also which encompasses the energy transition. So Jim, I'm hoping that you guys are people who talk, and with your writings and with your articles and with your researches out there, it gets to the hearing of the developed countries like America to help finance and also help Africa to be able to move from the use of fossil fuel to cleaner fuel, in order to also contribute its quota to the decarbonization, and also to help mitigate effects of climate change that has become a major topic of discussion in the world as it stands.
Well, it's certainly one of the goals of this podcast is to listen to all voices, and to help educate ourselves on that, because obviously every nation is not the same thing. Can you say just a little bit about the progress of renewable energy growth within different African countries?
Yeah, right. Significantly, there are some African countries that are making great attempts to transitioning, and also trying to contribute to use of cleaner fuel. A typical example is Kenya. Kenya, as it stands, is excelling in geothermal energy. And in Africa, I think it has about 92% renewable energy. And it's really contributing its quota to this whole conversation of cleaner fuel. And Morocco is increasing its renewable energy share to about 40% as its contribution. And we also know of Rwanda achieving a universal electricity access to its people. South Africa, I'm very much interested in South Africa because they produce coal and they depend heavily on coal for their electricity. So South Africa, we know, is launching a 10 billion renewable energy program as it stands, and that is significant. We're just hoping that they are going to get a boost to help achieve this goal. Another East African country that I know of that is investing heavily in hydropower is Ethiopia. And we are just also hoping that they're going to get the support they need from developed countries like yourself, like America, to help it achieve that goal it wants to achieve. Egypt is exploring a very good phase of the solar energy potentially through its Benban solar park. And we all know solar is also a very good source of energy that can help in this whole conversation. So we are hoping that they also get the necessary assistance they need to be able to achieve this. And I mean, significantly in Africa, as of 2022, geothermal energy capacity in Africa increased to about 965 megawatts, and it is, and most of this geothermal, installations or installed capacities are located in the eastern part of Africa. So we are hoping that concentrations in the middle belt, the middle Africa, and also west of Africa, where I come from, maybe specifically Ghana, in the northern part of Ghana, where we can harvest a lot of sun for our solar power. So I hope that there'll be a look at that, and also investments towards that can be made for us to realize and also contribute our quota to energy transition and also the talks of climate change.
Well, do I get to add to the Nairobi summit?
Pardon?
Can I add to the Nairobi summit?
Right.
No, that's it. I'm asking Jim. If Jim says I should go ahead, I'll go ahead.
Please do. Go ahead.
So I don't know if you read the Modern Energy Minimum by Todd Moss of the Energy for Growth Hub, where he's tried to look at just an African country. The average African country doesn't consume as much energy as the least populated state in America, which means if we take individual African countries, it's possible for us to have some good supply of electricity at the same time having the renewable sources as well. Now, that kind of like ties back to the Nairobi summit, and I had the opportunity to develop energy system models for some not-for-profit that I'm not allowed to disclose. And I think most of the presidents have always thought about, we want to decarbonize, but can we decarbonize by using our local resources? That is more like localization. For example, Nigeria has so much gas, right? Ghana has so much gas. Are we just going to abandon that and just switch to renewable? And that is where the question has always been. And that was one of the big talking points, like Ruben said, in addition to the financing, we have what it takes and we have the resources to produce energy. So as part of that work I had to develop an energy system model, that kind of projects from today up until 2070, what the demand is going to be. And now what we did was we take the OECD average and then we superimpose that on African countries and say, we want to achieve the same lifestyle or living standard as these developed countries. Now, between 2022 and 2070, how do we get there? Now, this is how we're looking at transition plan was. Let's assume that we have the next 25 years to use natural gas. What are we going to do? Then that means that we have to increase investment in natural gas or gas-fired plants. And that means we need to extract the resources profitably and equitably in such a way that we have enough to feed all those. Now, once we are building those ones, we also need investment to kind of augment the system, where we are investing in the renewable energy sources and trying to see, as you are pumping more gas, you are also including the renewable energy sources, so that after 2050, that flips. Then the country then has to retire their natural gas plants and switch. I want to say completely, but I think this was scenario based, so you don't know what it's going to be. But then from that point, they will switch to renewable. And that is the plan. And this team that I worked was a team of like African people, African expert. And from the African voice, that is what we want.
Well, I think that, I mean, what you brought out here is a really important kind of perspective. It's maybe the naive Northern view sometimes paints all African countries as one energy system, which obviously is clearly not true. Yeah. I mean, you have Kenya, as you said, with geothermal, with other places with hydropower, other places with coal, other places with fossil fuel kind of resources. And it has to build up from the local strength towards those goals, including probably as you said, a plan for a lot more electricity demand to raise the sustainable, kind of goals within the country. Just one question for maybe either you or Ruben is that there are a number of countries. You mentioned Nigeria with its natural gas and crude oil resources, Angola offshore crude oil resources, recent very large discoveries offshore Tanzania, maybe even Namibia. Some of those countries are going to want to take advantage of that local resource, that start from their own instead of importing solar panels from someplace else or whatever. Is there some part of the pushback of, why can't I use my own local resource to grow my energy security and also in that decarbonize in an appropriate way?
Okay.
So
okay. Well, John.
No, go ahead. No, Ruben, go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. Right, Jim. So, from my perspective, I want to believe that, in as much as we are talking about this whole thing and hoping that we get things materialize, and also we can confidently boast of Africa having those kind of natural resources, but it comes down to resource management and the commitment of our various governments to getting our resources that we have managed to the benefit of the majority of the people in the various countries. So in as much as we are talking about this whole conversation and hoping that we are able to tap into the natural resources we have, we hope that very good policies can be put in place by our governments to be able to tap into this kind of natural resources we have, for us to benefit and see for the general people of the individual countries to benefit from that. And when that is done committedly, and I use the word committedly because it is supposed to be a deliberate commitment to achieving this. So, I mean, policies can be put in place by our various governments, and also a deliberate commitment by this same government to get things done and get things rightly put for the benefit of the masses. So, John.
Thank you. That's good. I want to try to maybe close this conversation, but I want to give each one of you an opportunity to give the North some advice, right? Instead of you sitting here taking the great wisdom from the North, I want the North to listen for a minute. One of the main themes of our energy transition talk has been that the energy transition is up to each one of us, and we all have to make commitments, and we all need to be heard, and our voices need to be heard. So, Ruben, starting with you, I'm going to give you the responsibility to speak for Africa, and I want to give you an audience that the United States is listening to you right now. At least University of Southern California is going to be listening to you right now. What advice do you have for the North?
Okay, so my advice for the North is that when we look at the emission of carbon dioxide that eventually depletes our ozone, and Africa, I can confidently say, emits a little of the CO2, and majority of the CO2 emission is from the North. But eventually, when we pay the price for the climate change effects, such as the droughts and wildfires and stuff, and sometimes it gets to us so much that we have little resources, that is financial resources, to even mitigate the effect of climate change on our people. So I advise and plead, it's also a plea as well, that when it comes to talks of climate change and also financing of climate change, we know that Africa is not well resourced in terms of financial resource, in terms of having the financial capital to put up infrastructures, to help in the impact of this whole conversation. So we advise, or personally advise, that there should be so much commitment, financial commitment on the part of the North to help start with this whole conversation, and also to help us realize the impact of, climate change hugely or largely on our side. So with the Nairobi summit that they had, there were calls for multilateral financial sources, and also there were calls for financial sources largely to help Africa. So I plead that the calls of our leaders at this conversation at Nairobi should be heard, and also it should be quick. There should be a quick response to helping our people back in Africa, and it shouldn't just be, as John said, just a talk, but it should be action backing the talk, and also funds should be released as soon as possible for us to also be at par or be at that level to helping mitigate this whole climate change effect.
Thank you. That's very appropriate. So, John, if we abandon the empty talk and we start to have the right kind of conversations, what should we be thinking about?
Look, Jim, I'm just going to be honest, and
Please.
And let me say, we need to be very patient and show empathy. This is why I say that Africa is fast growing and we have the youngest population. At the same time, we are the people who suffer the most from climate change. But climate change is just one part of the talk. We have development challenges and we have social challenges. And that's what I say, we need to be patient and we need to show empathy. It's a nested problem. The global North is developed, little social challenges, so they can go for the new technologies. In the global South, they don't have that. So when we look at all that and look at more like a multifaceted problem for Africa, it helps us see better than what we're looking at. That is one. My second advice is going to be, we need to talk. When I say we need to talk, the global South and the global North need to both talk. For me, finance is not a big problem, because I feel like once we get the fundamentals right, we can always get the money. The money is there, but the fundamentals are never right. So if we, or in other words, if the global South and the global North come together, and it doesn't have to be the whole global North. Let's say one country in the global South wants to have an agreement with, let's say, Ghana. You need to go sit with all the stakeholders in Ghana, try to understand what they want. And at the same time, the Ghanaian government and its stakeholders also need to understand what the global, and together, collectively, we can come up with policies that are both kind of like agreeable and actionable from both parties, and get both parties to commit. And for me, I think once we have these two, the financing is more like, is the icing on the cake. It's just probably going to be like, we have all these two fundamentals. We know Africa has this big problem, and that is not just climate change, it's more than that. Let's look at that. Let's get the people involved. Let's come up with all these policies together. And then it's more like you can now sprinkle the icing or maybe like the spices on the meat. And I think that's the only way to go forward, because we have, the global North has to listen to the needs of the global South.
When I worked with an oil company, I had several friends from Nigeria, and it wasn't always icing on the cake, it was hot sauce on the food.
Hot sauce.
They never get their food not spicy enough.
Yeah.
But charity is often equated with sympathy. I get from your message that Africa doesn't need sympathy, it needs empathy. It needs the understanding of what your needs really are.
That's correct.
Felix, it's your chance. Speak for Africa. Felix, are you there?
We can hear you.
I think it's Mike. Felix, we can hear you. Check your mic.
Okay, well, Eben, why don't you take the concluding opportunity here? We thank you very much, all of you, for your really good insights and honest talk, and appreciate that. So, Eben, you get the last word for Africa.
Okay, so
no pressure.
Sure. So to add up and pick up from what John said, in Africa, because of our tropical location and different resources and other stuff, we need a tailored issue. there is not one stream of solution to our issues. We need to tailor the issues. And Jim, one thing is, most of these African nations, you did mention, they being Nigeria, Tanzania, and all the other African countries. One thing we should realize is we depend on these natural resources, especially the fossil fuels. We depend on their economic rents to build our economy. And looking at the debt to GDP ratio of all these African countries, you get to realize that when we take off these fossil fuels, our economy is going to it's going to cripple. It's going to cripple. So now the global north telling us to transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. It's like telling us to put away. We should put away what you're having, and you're giving us something. And at the end of the day, we've seen from the example of the COP26, the global north promising South Africa some huge money and not fulfilling it. So if this is what is going to occur, if we don't build a finance mechanism as a medium to resolve this issue, it's going to be a case of death for all these nations who are going to put away their natural resources and focus on renewable. So I think it should work in parallel and bridge the gap over there, because we still have deficit of electricity to homes and other stuff. And currently, I think we have about 600 million homes without electricity in Africa. And the African Development Bank did put out some kind of fund, which, if I can recall very well, is the Desert to Power Initiative, which is providing about 250 million people with electricity. But we still have a deficit of about 350 million. And looking at all this, I think it should work in parallel, because if we don't do that, it's going to cripple most of the African economic nations. So if indeed we are looking at providing or closing the gap between the global north and global south, I think there should be a parallel model over there whereby it's going to gradually fade out. And I think it will link up with what John was talking about, the 2050 having a flip over there. It's something we can't just fade off. It's just something we can't fade off from. So if really we are looking at bridging the gap, I think we should have a parallel model whereby it's slowly going to fade out, because these resources is our blessing. So omitting these resources it's going to turn a resource scarce, and there's going to be a lot of unemployment and all other stuff. So I think there should be a parallel model and tailoring of policies according to each and every African country, because we have got special resources. And one thing that is common is we with our tropical zones, solar is going to benefit us very much. So whilst we are putting all this together, like I said, and I'm hammering again, we should have a parallel model whereby we are slowly going to fade out, and with the fossil fuel and transition to the renewable energy in a manner that is not going to be a resource scarce, it's not going to put pressure on Africa, it's not going to put a lot of climate repercussions and all other stuff. So in general, what I'm trying to say is these resources are economic rents. These resources is what boosts our economy, and this resource is everything to us. So fading away from it without a solution is going to be a case of death.
Well, thank you. Felix, I saw that you were back on. I want to let you to have your word in this as well, your concluding comments for us.
Thank you. Hope everyone can hear me now.
Yes.
Yes. I want to start by showing deep gratitude to the global commitment to addressing climate change, especially in Africa. Our continent is home to some of the world's most vulnerable communities in the wake of these changing climate issues. So my advice to the North is, in order to ensure this global transition from fossil fuels to net zero emissions, there should be policies and moves like technology transfer. So I'm hoping that the North will share green technology and knowledge transfer, which is essential in helping with the African countries to be able to advance renewable energy technologies and expertise. Also, there should be capacity building, which is collaborative programs should be established to enhance the capacity of African governments and institutions in managing and implementing climate initiatives. This includes training and education for local experts. And as John rightly mentioned, there should be strategic partnership and collaborations, encourage public and private sector partnerships between the northern businesses and African enterprises. These joint ventures and collaborations can drive sustainable development and adaptation of renewable energy practices. For this to be achievable, we need to do our part as Africans, especially our leaders. It needs to be transparency and accountability on the government level, so that we can rightly move in the direction of what we want and serve the people better. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Felix. Just to conclude here, Africa also has another natural resource that's critical to the energy transition or in climate change, in my view, and that is the forests of the Congo River Basin. Just like the Amazon River Basin, as a carbon sink, as a natural carbon sequestration, often called the lungs of the world, the protection of the natural resources within some of the major river systems, which are huge, which are massive, global scale, is also a resource that Africa needs to protect. Well, thank you, and I'm deeply honored to have all four of you gentlemen participating on this panel. And thank you for allowing me to have a little bit of fun about having you represent all of Africa. Obviously, this is a deadly serious topic, and your honesty and direct talk, not empty talk, are greatly appreciated. We will be listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Have a good one.
Have a good one, everybody.
One takeaway from this episode is that we need both private and public investment to pay the bill for going green. Whether that bill is $276 trillion through 2050, as McKinsey and Company has estimated, or only $131 trillion, as the International Renewable Energy Agency, or IRENA, has estimated. The cost of moving quickly from an energy ecosystem built on fossil fuels to a low and zero carbon energy ecosystem is a big task. The recent U.S. investments in clean energy of nearly $240 billion seems insufficient in comparison. Institutions from the World Bank to the IMF also have a role to play in incentivizing private sector to invest in this pathway. Our Ghanaian students also made it clear that the energy transition is viewed very differently by the global South as compared to the more developed nations in the global North. The need to balance the goals of sustainable development with access to reliable, affordable, and green energy looks different from their experience to the rhetoric of North America. The African nations have started on their path for the energy transition, but the richer countries need to contribute by investing directly in local economies.
Because the energy transition is up to the changes we're willing to make as individuals and as a society. Until next time, we hope you enjoyed a little more of the story of the energy transition, because the energy transition is up to you and me.
We would like to thank the USC Urshagi Center for Energy Transition, which aims to develop innovations in energy technologies and foster the transition to a low-carbon future, for sponsoring this podcast. Special thanks also to our guests for today, and Abi, our technical guru, for their important contributions to our podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to Energy Transition Talk. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we would appreciate it so much if you could leave a rating and review and subscribe to our podcast so you can automatically get access to our new episodes. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Justine.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Paulina, signing off from Energy Transition Talk. Stay tuned for the next episode.